It was the day I was promoted to director. When I got home that evening, my husband, Daniel, who was usually late, was already there. He had prepared a surprise party just for me. And in that very moment, something happened that made my blood run cold, a shock that turned my world upside down. For the year since our wedding, I thought my life was the very definition of perfect. As the only daughter of Harrison Vance, the formidable founder of Vance Consolidated, one of the nascent top development corporations, I had been wrapped in silk since birth, wanting for nothing. People said I was lucky, but I always believed the greatest luck of my life was meeting and marrying Daniel Morgan. He didn't come from money, but he had a fierce will and exceptional talent. Most importantly, he loved me with all his heart. At least, that's what I believed. The company he was currently running, Vance Morgan Development, bore my family name, but it was, in truth, a wedding gift from my parents to both of us. It was the culmination of my father's hard work, a venture he entrusted to his treasured son-in-law with everything on the line. I rarely involved myself in the company's management, dedicating my time to caring for the small family I had always dreamed of, creating a warm and loving home. Life flowed on peacefully, until that fateful Tuesday afternoon. That day, Daniel told me he had an urgent business trip to Miami, a coastal city, a few hours by plane from our home in Greenwich, Connecticut. He said a client had called him in for an emergency meeting and he probably wouldn't be back until the weekend. I was a little disappointed that our plans to see a movie that evening were canceled, but I quickly helped him pack his travel bag, urging him to be careful and take care of his health. He kissed my forehead, his warm smile and gentle eyes just as they always were. "Be good while I'm gone," he said. "I'll be back as soon as the work is done." As I watched his car disappear down the long driveway, I felt a strange emptiness in a corner of my heart. The sprawling estate suddenly felt cold and vast. I wandered through the house, busying myself with trivial tasks, but my mind was elsewhere. Suddenly, I remembered the luxury condo in South Beach my parents had bought for us before we were married. We had barely used it, occasionally letting close friends borrow it when they vacationed in Florida. It's been so long since I've seen it. I wonder what it looks like now, I thought. What if I went down there, cleaned it up a bit, and gave Daniel a surprise? A smile crept across my face as I imagined the look of astonishment on his face. Without another moment of hesitation, I grabbed my car keys, drove to the airport, and booked the next flight to Miami. 3 hours later, I stood before the door of a high-end condo on the 25th floor, overlooking the sparkling waters of South Beach. Everything was as quiet and luxurious as I remembered. I slipped the key into the lock, unable to hide my excitement. But the moment the door creaked open, I froze. The space inside was not the empty, silent place I had imagined. Faint music drifted from within, and in the entryway, a pair of pink women's designer slides was placed neatly on the mat. My heart began to beat a little faster. Could Daniel have lent it to a friend and forgotten to tell me? I tried to reassure myself as I cautiously pushed the door open and stepped inside. Just then, a young woman walked out of the bedroom. She was dressed in comfortable loungewear, her hair tied up in a high ponytail. She had a beautiful face, but there was a weariness in her eyes. What truly horrified me was the 1-year-old baby boy in her arms, a pacifier in his mouth. Seeing me, she jumped, her eyes immediately filled with a sharp wariness. "Excuse me, who are you looking for?" Her voice was clear but unfamiliar. I stood there like a statue, my mind reeling. Who is this woman? Whose child is this? Why are they in our home? 1,000 questions flooded my mind, but a voice of reason told me to stay calm. I took a deep breath, and though I could feel the muscles in my face stiffen, I forced a smile as naturally as I could. "Oh, I'm so sorry. Is this not Unit 2501? I must have gotten the floor wrong." The young woman looked me up and down, from head to toe. Seeing my elegant attire and bewildered expression, her guard seemed to lower slightly. She nodded. "Yes, this is 2501. If you tell me who you're looking for, maybe I can help." "Oh no, it's all right. I must have just lost my head for a moment. My apologies for the intrusion." I spoke quickly, turning to leave. I needed a quiet space to process this chaos. But just as I turned, the baby in her arms suddenly burst into tears. She quickly tried to soothe him. "Shh, it's okay, my sweet Leo. Daddy will be here soon. Daddy Daniel is bringing you lots of presents." The words Daddy Daniel struck my heart like a dagger. My whole body went rigid. Daniel? My husband? Daniel Morgan? No, it can't be. It must be a different Daniel. I tried to cling to that fragile thread of hope, but my feet felt rooted to the floor. I had to know the truth. The moment she said, Daddy Daniel, my world seemed to stop. I could no longer hear the baby's cries, the distant sound of waves, or the hum of the air conditioner in the hallway. There was only a deathly silence and an emptiness that threatened to swallow me whole. I kept repeating to myself that it was just a coincidence, that it was a common name. But deep down, a cruel voice was screaming at me to stop lying to myself. Just then, her cell phone rang from her pocket. Holding the baby with one arm, she fumbled to pull it out with the other. A bright, sweet smile spread across her face as she saw the caller's name. She answered eagerly, her voice now filled with a playful affection that was completely different from her earlier wariness. Hello? Hey, babe, where are you? I pressed myself against the wall next to the doorway, out of sight, my heart pounding against my ribs. I couldn't leave. An invisible force held me there. I had to hear, had to know who the man on the other end of the line was. Yeah, me and the baby are just waiting. Leo's been a little fussy today. I think he misses his daddy, she said, cooing at the child. The man on the phone must have said something, because the smile on her lips grew even wider. You really bought it? The bag I sent you a picture of? Oh my God, that thing is over $15,000. You're the best. I love you. $15,000. The number was like a splash of ice-cold water across my face. Daniel. My husband, who always told me the company was going through a tough time and we needed to tighten our belts. Who said we had to set an example for the employees by being frugal? The same Daniel who, for our anniversary, had turned down my request for a simple diamond necklace worth a few $1,000s, saying, Honey, is now really the time to be making such extravagant purchases? That man was now happily spending a fortune on a handbag for another woman. My throat went dry, and a bitter taste filled my mouth. The conversation continued, and every word she spoke was another twist of the knife in my bleeding heart. Yeah, Leo's being a good boy. Oh, babe, let's go look at that new condo development over in the design district this weekend. My friend said it's amazing. They even have a private rooftop pool. Let's get one for Leo to have space to play when he's older, okay? Her voice was as sweet as honey, but to me, it was the most disgusting sound in the world. She was living in the home my parents had bought for me, asking my husband to buy her a new one. I know you love me and Leo more than anything. Okay, drive safe. I'm gonna start getting your dinner ready. Talk to you soon. Mwah. The call ended. The woman, flush with happiness and satisfaction, went back inside. The door to Unit 2501 closed, and silence returned to the hallway, but a terrible storm had just begun to rage inside me. There was no room for doubt anymore. The husband I had loved and trusted with my entire heart had betrayed me. He not only had a mistress, but also a 1-year-old son. That meant he had been deceiving me since we were first married, or perhaps even before. All those whispered words of love, the tender gestures, the promises of a happy future, it was all just a perfectly orchestrated play. A wave of nausea rose from my stomach. I leaned against the wall for support. The tears began to fall. Hot, bitter tears. What did I do wrong? Was I not enough? Not pretty enough? Didn't I love him enough? Why would he do this to me? I gave him everything. Success, money, status, and my unconditional love. And this was what I got in return. The pain morphed into another emotion, something terrifyingly cold and empty. I didn't scream. I didn't break things. I just stood in that empty hallway and let the cruel truth eat away at my soul. The cold promises he had whispered to another woman had already killed my heart. The tears flowed endlessly, but I didn't make a single sound. For a moment, I wanted to storm into that apartment and expose everything. I wanted to confront Daniel and scream, "Why?" I wanted to slap the face of the woman who had destroyed my family. But then, another image flashed in my mind, my parents. My father, who had placed all his faith and expectations in Daniel, even entrusting him with the business he'd built over a lifetime. My mother, who loved Daniel like her own son. If I made a scene, how heartbroken would they be? This affair would become a public scandal, and it would do serious damage to Vance Consolidated's reputation. I couldn't act selfishly, thinking only of my own pain. And Daniel, he had planned everything so perfectly, deceiving me so completely for so long. Would a man like that simply admit his wrongdoing? Or would he deny it, maybe even try to pin all the blame on me? No, confronting them now was the worst possible move. It might give me a fleeting moment of satisfaction, but it would be followed by a storm of consequences I couldn't handle. I could lose everything. And he and that woman might just run off with the company funds I had provided. Cold, hard reason slowly began to take control of my emotions. I wiped my tears and took a deep breath, trying to regain my composure. The pain was still there, a throbbing ache, but on top of it, a steely resolve began to take shape. I will not be broken. I will not let a traitor and his mistress live happily on my suffering. What they took from me, I will get it all back with interest. As if nothing had happened, I maintained a composed expression and quietly walked to the elevator. I didn't fly straight home. Instead, I drove to a quiet cafe near the condo, choosing a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. I ordered a black coffee, no sugar. The bitter taste helped clear my head. Sitting there, I began to piece everything together. Daniel's increasingly frequent, urgent business trips, the calls he always took outside, the vague expenses on his credit card statements that he'd explained away as client entertainment. All these little pieces that I had never paid attention to now fit together to form a perfect, disgusting picture of infidelity. He had been systematically and meticulously deceiving me. In that case, I would repay him with a plan of my own, a precise and cruel plan to make him pay for everything he had done. About an hour later, I saw Daniel's familiar rental car pull up to the front of the building. My heart clenched again. He got out of the car. In his hands were a large bouquet of roses and several luxury shopping bags. His face was lit up with anticipation, glowing with a happiness I hadn't seen in a very long time. He had no idea that his betrayed wife was watching this entire scene from a corner nearby. I raised my phone, zoomed in as much as I could, and captured the moment. The photo wasn't perfectly clear, but it was enough to recognize Daniel and the gifts he was carrying. This would be the first piece of evidence. As I watched him cheerfully walk into the building, I no longer felt pain. Instead, a cold fury began to build. The plan had begun. From this moment on, I was no longer the naive, devoted wife, Eleanor Vance. I would become someone else, a woman who knew how to calculate, how to be patient, and how to take back what was mine. In this war, I would be the victor. I took a sip of my coffee. The bitterness spread through my mouth, but my mind had never been clearer. After that day, I returned home as if nothing had happened. I was still the gentle, considerate wife. When Daniel came back from his business trip, I greeted him with a smile and prepared a warm dinner. He didn't notice any difference, perfectly playing the role of a loving husband. He rambled on about what a grueling trip it had been, filled with tough contract negotiations. I listened to his every lie in silence, my heart filled with nothing but contempt. The more perfect his performance, the stronger my desire for revenge grew. The first step of my plan was to get close to the other woman, Laura Hayes. I needed to know about her relationship with Daniel, and most importantly, I needed to gather more evidence. But I couldn't appear as Daniel's wife. I needed a different identity, a perfect disguise that she wouldn't suspect for a second. I spent nearly a week observing Laura. It wasn't difficult. Through a contact who worked at the phone company, I got her number based on the frequent calls from Daniel's phone. From there, I found her social media accounts. Laura was not a cautious person. She frequently posted pictures of her son, expensive gifts, and meals at fancy restaurants, but she always cleverly obscured or cropped out the face of the man she was with. Scrolling through her personal page, I saw, beneath the lavish lifestyle that was so generously provided, a deep-seated loneliness and a desire for validation. I learned her daily routine. In the mornings, she took her son for a walk in a nearby park. In the afternoons, she shopped at the grocery store or the mall. She didn't seem to have any close friends in Miami. It was always just her and the baby, a lonely pair. This was the weakness I could exploit. I decided to orchestrate a chance meeting. I prepared meticulously. I chose an elegant but not overly flashy outfit, applied light makeup, and drove a different car one Daniel had never seen. I wanted to create the image of a successful, friendly, and approachable woman. It was on a rainy afternoon. I knew Laura would be going to the grocery store. I'd seen her post on social media that her fridge was empty. I arrived there first, parked, and waited patiently in a cafe across the street. Sure enough, a short while later, Laura appeared, pushing a stroller with her son. I waited until she had been inside the store for about 30 minutes before making my move. I got in my car and parked near the exit, waiting. The rain started coming down harder. As I had predicted, when Laura came out of the store, her hands were full of grocery bags, and she was struggling to push the stroller with one hand. Just then, the heavens opened up, and rain began to pour down as if from a bucket. She looked flustered, and when the baby started crying at the sound of thunder, she frantically looked for shelter. This was my chance. I slowly drove up to her, rolled down the window, and said, "Excuse me, the rain is terrible. Can I give you a ride? I'm heading in that direction anyway. I can drop you home." Laura looked up at me, her eyes filled with surprise and suspicion. She hesitated. I smiled the kindest, most harmless smile I could muster. "Please, don't feel obligated. I just feel so bad for the baby. He's going to catch a cold in this. Come on, I'm not a bad person." Perhaps it was because I was a woman and spoke gently, or perhaps the situation was just too difficult for her, but Laura nodded in agreement. I quickly got out of the car, opened the trunk, and helped her load her groceries and get the baby into the car seat I had conveniently pre-installed. My every action was natural and proficient. "Thank you so much," Laura said, breathing a sigh of relief once she was comfortably in the car. "I don't know what I would have done without you." "Don't mention it. It's a pleasure to help," I said, starting to drive and initiating a conversation. "I'm Eleanor, by the way, but you can call me Ellie. I'm Laura. And this is Leo, my son." "Oh, Leo, he's so handsome." "Absolutely adorable," I said, glancing at the baby in the rearview mirror. A sharp pain pierced my heart. The child looked so much like Daniel, but I quickly suppressed the emotion and kept the smile on my face. The chance meeting, orchestrated by me, had gone off perfectly. Laura, completely unsuspecting, had just stepped into the first of my traps. As the car moved smoothly through the downpour, I tried to create a comfortable atmosphere to get Laura to open up. I played some soft instrumental music. The city outside was a blur of rain, but inside the car, it was warm and pleasant. "So where do you live?" "I'll take you there," I asked warmly, as if we were old friends. Laura gave me directions to the luxury condo I already knew so well. Throughout the drive, I expertly steered the conversation. I started by complaining about the challenges of childcare, making up stories about my beloved nephew, even though I didn't have one. "It must be so hard taking care of Leo all by yourself. I watched my nephew for just half a day, and I felt like my arms and legs were going to fall off." My words seemed to strike a chord with Laura. She sighed, looking out at the rainy street, a hint of melancholy on her face. "It can be tough sometimes, Ellie, but when I think of my son, I find the strength. Thankfully, his father loves us so much. He works incredibly hard so that we can live comfortably without any worries." "That's wonderful," I said, continuing to guide the conversation in the direction I wanted. "There's no greater blessing than finding a good man who loves his wife and child. Your husband must be very successful." At the praise for her man, Laura's face lit up. She couldn't hide her pride. She began to boast, which was exactly what I had been waiting for. "Oh yes, he's amazing. A completely self-made man, you know. He built his company, Vance Morgan Development, from the ground up. It's becoming quite a reputable firm, all thanks to his hard work. He said the company was named after a very important friend from his past." I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my nails digging into the leather. Vance Morgan Development. The name my father had given us, filled with all his love for his only daughter, was now being twisted by Laura into a memory of some important old friend. Daniel. He wasn't just negating my feelings, he was erasing my family's contributions and sacrifices. He had fabricated a self-made success story to deceive this naive mistress. I swallowed my rage and continued to play the part of the impressed listener. "Wow, that's incredible. He's handsome, successful, and adores his wife and child. You're a very lucky woman, Laura." My praise made Laura even more boastful. She started talking about how much Daniel doted on her, the expensive designer things he bought her, and how he had promised to make her and their son his official family soon. "He told me," she said, her voice full of conviction. "Just wait a little longer. Once he takes care of a few annoying loose ends, he's going to come for us. He said that me and Leo are his real family." As Laura was excitedly chattering away, I quietly turned on the recording function on my phone, which I had placed in the console between our seats. I had already angled it to pick up the sound perfectly. Every single word Laura spoke was being clearly recorded. To make things more concrete, I asked a crucial question. "Leo looks so much like his dad. He must be a very handsome man." Laura giggled, the happy laugh of a woman in love. "Yes, everyone says Leo is the spitting image of his dad, especially his nose and mouth." She traced the outline of the sleeping child's face. And then, she innocently admitted the one fact I already knew but needed confirmed. Well, he is Daniel's son, after all. The recording was complete. I had obtained irrefutable evidence of their relationship, of the hidden child, and of Daniel's lies about the company's origins. The car arrived at the underground parking garage of the condo. I helped Laura with her bags. Before saying goodbye, I said, "It was so nice talking to you today, Laura. I just moved to Miami not too long ago, so I don't have many friends. If you're okay with it, maybe we could exchange numbers and get coffee sometime?" Laura readily agreed. It seemed she, too, needed a friend to confide in. After we saved each other's numbers, I left. Sitting in my car, I played back the recording. Laura's clear voice filled the car, talking about the happiness she was enjoying, a happiness built on lies and my pain. But I no longer felt angry. This recording was the first bullet I had loaded into the chamber of my revenge. After our chance meeting, Laura and I started talking more frequently. I would text her first every day, asking how Leo was eating or sending her parenting tips I found online. I played the role of the supportive older sister and confidant, always ready to listen. As I expected, Laura quickly began to see me as her emotional anchor. She told me everything, from Daniel's promise to buy her a new car to his complaints about the stress he was under because of his old hag of a wife at home. Through Laura's words, the version of me she described was an annoying, unsupportive woman who made her husband's life difficult, an obstacle to their true love. It was ironic, hearing about myself from a third party's perspective. But I listened patiently, offering words of comfort and feigned empathy. "Don't worry," I'd often say. "A capable man like Daniel will surely sort everything out soon. You just need to be strong and be his pillar of support." My encouragement made Laura trust me even more. She had no idea that the older sister she was pouring her heart out to was the very same old hag she spoke of with such contempt. I deliberately orchestrated more chance encounters. Once, knowing Laura was taking her son for his vaccinations, I showed up at the same clinic, pretending to be there with my nephew. We sat side by side in the waiting room, sharing the worries of motherhood. Another time, knowing she liked a particular brand of children's clothing, I bought a few beautiful outfits and gifted them to Leo, saying it was a present for my little sister's son. Every time we met, I wore luxurious clothes and drove expensive cars that Daniel, of course, knew nothing about. I consistently projected the image of a successful, wealthy, and free woman. I wanted to build in Laura's mind the image of a role model she could aspire to, a woman who could live like a queen without depending on a man. Gradually, Laura began to treat me like a real sister. She invited me to her home for dinner and introduced me to Leo as his very special Auntie Ellie. Seeing her serve me dishes she had probably learned to cook for Daniel, hearing my husband's child call me Auntie Ellie, my heart filled with a complex mix of pain and bitterness. But above all those emotions was an ice-cold composure. I was on the right path. This fake friendship was the perfect cover. It not only helped me gather more information about Daniel and Laura, but it was also a tool to execute the next phase of my plan. Naive and trusting, Laura had become the most important piece on the chessboard of my revenge. She had no idea that every secret and confidence she shared with me was pushing her and her lover one step closer to the edge of the cliff. Sometimes, when I saw Leo's innocent smile, a pang of guilt would hit me. The child was innocent in all of this. But then, the memory of Daniel's betrayal, of the sleepless nights spent in agony, would extinguish that faint flicker of pity. I couldn't afford to be weak. If I didn't strike first, the ones to be destroyed would be me and my family. I told myself this wasn't just for revenge, it was self-preservation, a fight to protect myself and what was mine. This friendship may have been a lie, but right now, it was my sharpest weapon. While the seeds of conflict between Daniel and Laura were being sown by financial pressure, I began to execute the next phase of my plan, a critical move to completely strip Daniel of his power at Vance Morgan Development. I needed to turn him from a competent CEO into a useless figurehead. One morning, to the surprise of many employees, I showed up at the office. In the past, I had rarely made an appearance. People only knew me as the CEO's wife, a wealthy woman living a life of leisure. Daniel himself was quite surprised to see me in his office. "What are you doing here?" he asked, a hint of annoyance in his voice. "There's a lot going on at the office. Why don't you go home and rest?" I smiled the sweet smile I had practiced countless times in the mirror. I was just bored at home. "Anyway, this company is in my name. Can't I come and see how everyone works? Maybe learn a thing or two from you?" Daniel couldn't find a reason to refuse and reluctantly agreed. From that day on, I came to the office every day. At first, I just sat quietly in his office, reading documents and reviewing reports, not interfering in any way. I wanted to give him the impression that I was just there to kill time. A few weeks later, once Daniel had grown accustomed to my presence, I made my first move. "Honey," I said one afternoon, "you're meeting with Mr. Chen, our real estate partner, later, right? Can I come with you? I want to learn how you negotiate with clients." Daniel hesitated for a moment. Mr. Chen was one of the company's largest and most important partners, but seeing my eager and seemingly naive expression, he couldn't bring himself to say no. He probably thought that a woman who knew nothing about business would have no impact and might even help his image. That was Daniel's fatal mistake. He had forgotten that I was the daughter of a seasoned businessman. From a young age, I had accompanied my father to meetings, listening to his teachings on market analysis and negotiation tactics. Business acumen was in my blood. At the meeting with Mr. Chen, I said very little. I just listened and observed. But when negotiations stalled over a few pricing clauses, I quietly spoke up. I didn't talk about hard numbers. I spoke about the long-term partnership, the trust associated with my father's Vance Consolidated, and the strategic advantages we could create together in the future. My words were gentle but carried weight. I had subtly reminded Mr. Chen of the real power behind Vance Morgan Development while presenting a grander vision. Mr. Chen, a veteran of the business world, understood the situation immediately. He looked at me with a completely different expression, one of respect. In the end, the deal was closed on terms far more favorable than Daniel had anticipated. On the way back, Daniel looked at me with a complicated expression. He seemed pleased with the successful contract, but there was also a hint of unease. He was starting to realize that I wasn't as simple as he thought. I maintained my innocent facade. Did I say something wrong? I was just saying what was on my mind. From that day on, under the pretext of wanting to learn, I attended all of Daniel's important client meetings. Gradually, I got to know all of his partners and built strong relationships with them. They no longer treated me just as the daughter of Harrison Vance. They began to respect me for my intelligence, competence, and vision. Partners started calling me directly instead of Daniel. New contracts were sent to me for review first. Daniel began to feel sidelined. He was losing control over his work. He tried to meet with a few clients on his own to regain his footing, but he failed. In the eyes of the partners, I was now the de facto head of Vance Morgan Development, the final decision-maker. The territory he had once proudly ruled was now being slowly but surely encroached upon by me. He was becoming a ghost CEO in his own company. Between the stress at work and Laura's endless demands, Daniel became increasingly irritable and exhausted. He no longer bothered to hide his discomfort whenever he saw me at the office. But since I was the nominal owner of the company, there was nothing he could do. Meanwhile, my sisterly bond with Laura grew even deeper. Laura saw me as her only escape, a savior to whom she could vent all her problems. She had no idea that the person indirectly causing all these problems was her dear Ellie. One weekend evening, Laura called me. Her voice was unusually excited. "Ellie, let's go for a drink. I have something to brag about." "What is it?" "You sound so happy," I asked, feigning curiosity. "Daniel's buying me that condo. He even put down the deposit this afternoon. I'm so thrilled, Ellie." Laura's voice echoed through the phone. A chill ran down my spine. Daniel had embezzled another large sum from the company funds. The price of his foolishness was getting steeper. But on the surface, I pretended to be happy for her. "That's amazing. Congratulations. We have to celebrate. We agreed to meet at a high-end rooftop bar in a Manhattan hotel. Laura was already there when I arrived. She was wearing a striking red dress, her makeup elaborate, and she couldn't hide her triumphant expression. She probably thought that this condo solidified her position in Daniel's heart. We ordered drinks, and Laura drank a lot. She kept clinking our glasses, rambling on about the beautiful future she and Leo would have in their new home, and how Daniel had promised to divorce his wife and marry her soon. I knew it, she slurred slightly. Daniel loves me the most. How can that old hag even compare to me? She's old, ugly, and can't even have kids. Her words were like daggers, digging deep into my old wounds. Daniel and I had tried to have a child for the past year, but to no avail. It was my greatest sorrow. And now, it had become a weapon used by my husband's mistress to insult me. I gripped my glass tightly, barely suppressing the urge to lash out. Seeing my silence, Laura probably thought I was sympathizing with her. She leaned closer, her breath smelling of alcohol and perfume, and whispered, "You know what, Ellie? Sometimes I just wish that bitch would just disappear from this world. If it weren't for her, Daniel would be all mine. I'd be called Mrs. Morgan, not sneaking around like this." A shiver went down my spine. Beneath her naive, materialistic exterior hid a vicious and calculating soul. She didn't just want Daniel's money, she wanted my position, and perhaps even my life. They say a drunk person's words are a sober person's thoughts. I sensed a real danger from this woman. She was not as simple as I had thought. I looked deep into Laura's eyes, which were hazy with alcohol but still glinting with jealousy and hatred. I realized I couldn't let this go on. I pretended to be drunk myself, slurring my words. "What are you talking about? She's his legal wife. Don't even think about such foolish things." Laura scoffed, a twisted smile on her face. "Legal? What does that matter? That'll be in the past soon enough. In this world, the one with the man's love and his child is the one who wins." That night, after dropping a heavily intoxicated Laura home, I sat alone in my car for a long time. Her words echoed in my ears. I wish she would just disappear. That latent malice made me rethink everything. My plan would have to be accelerated, and it would have to be more decisive, because my enemies didn't just want my money, they wanted my life. This was no longer a battle to reclaim my assets and honor. It had become a fight for survival. After that night at the bar with Laura, I was more vigilant than ever. Though spoken in a drunken stupor, her words had planted a seed of doubt and fear in my mind. I knew that Daniel and Laura were capable of anything to achieve their goals, and my intuition was not wrong. About a week later, Daniel's attitude suddenly changed. He became unusually affectionate and attentive, just like when we had first fallen in love. He no longer got annoyed when I went to the office. He even started asking about my work. Most notably, he started cooking for me, making all my favorite dishes. "You've been working so hard lately. You've lost so much weight," he said, handing me a bowl of steaming, rich bone broth. "I made this to help you regain your strength." He looked at me with loving eyes. In the past, I would have been moved to tears. But now, this sudden attention only made me uneasy. How could a man who was cheating on his wife, funding his mistress and their secret child, and losing all his power at work to his wife, be so genuinely kind to her? There had to be a sinister motive behind it. On the surface, I happily accepted the broth and praised his cooking, but my mind was on high alert. That evening, I pretended to take a few sips, and then said I was too full to finish. I secretly transferred the leftovers into a small, sealed container and hid it in my handbag. The next day, on my way to work, I stopped at a pet store and bought a small, white, and very active hamster. I named him Pip. I took Pip to my private office at the company, a room I had recently set up to have a personal space away from Daniel's watch. From that day on, I secretly saved a small portion of every meal Daniel made for me. I lied and said I was taking it to the office to eat for lunch to save time, and I gave all that food to Pip. For the next few days, Daniel continued his perfect husband act. He cooked all sorts of expensive and nutritious meals for me. He even brought home a bottle of supplements, saying a friend had gotten them from overseas and that they were excellent for women's health. Of course, I didn't take a single pill. I crushed them and mixed them into Pip's food. The hamster remained healthy, happily running on his wheel. For a moment, I wondered if I was overreacting. Maybe Daniel genuinely regretted his actions and wanted to make it up to me, but my intuition whispered that things were not that simple. And then, my worst fears came true. About 2 weeks after I got Pip, I came into the office one morning to find him curled up in his cage, dead. There had been no signs of illness, no injuries. He was just lying there, his small body stiff. My heart stopped. I sank to the floor, staring blankly at Pip's tiny body. I was right. My suspicions had been confirmed in the cruelest way possible. Daniel Morgan, the man I shared a bed with, had been trying to poison me. He wanted me to die slowly, without a trace, as if from some illness. He must have been using a slow-acting poison so that when I died, everyone would think it was due to poor health. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I no longer recognized the man I had once loved. He wasn't just a traitor. He was a monster, a cold-blooded murderer. He was trying to kill me to be with his mistress, to take over all of my family's wealth. With trembling hands, I took out my phone and took pictures of the dead hamster, the food containers Daniel had given me, and the bottle of supplements. This would be the evidence of his attempted murder plot. Pip, the little hamster, had sacrificed his life to save mine. I owed him my life, and I swore I would make the one responsible for his death pay a terrible price. My anger and fear transformed into an extreme hatred. My plan for revenge was no longer just about reclaiming justice. It was about saving my own life. Pip's death was a chilling warning. I could no longer live under the same roof as a man who was plotting to kill me. Every moment with Daniel felt suffocating. His smile, his concern, it all looked disgusting and terrifying to me. I had to leave immediately, but leaving abruptly would arouse Daniel's suspicion. I needed a plausible excuse. That evening, after secretly burying Pip, I returned home with a tired and sad expression. Daniel, as usual, greeted me with a lavish dinner. "What's wrong? You don't look well," he asked, his voice filled with fake concern. I sighed, rubbing my temples. "I don't know. I've been feeling so tired lately, and I have no appetite. Maybe it's the stress from work." "Then let's go see a doctor tomorrow," Daniel quickly suggested. "No, that's not necessary. I'll be fine with some rest," I said, pausing for a moment before adding, as if the thought had just occurred to me. "Actually, would it be okay if I went to my parents' place in the Hamptons for a few days? I haven't seen them in a while. My mom can take care of me, and the fresh air might do me some good." As I spoke, a flicker of something passed through Daniel's eyes, a flash I didn't miss. It was a look of joy. He was happy that I was leaving. Perhaps it would make his plan easier, or maybe it just meant he could spend time freely with his mistress. But he quickly masked the emotion and put on a look of disappointment. "Of course, honey. Go and get some rest, but I'll miss you so much. I'll come back to you in a few days. I'll be back before you know it," I said, struggling to keep the hatred from making my voice tremble. The plan was agreed upon more easily than I had expected. That night, I couldn't sleep a wink. Lying next to Daniel, listening to his steady breathing, I imagined how many nights he had lain next to me, harboring such monstrous thoughts. Even breathing the same air as him felt nauseating. In the middle of the night, after confirming that Daniel was sound asleep, I quietly slipped out of bed. I didn't dare turn on the lights, using the faint glow of my phone to navigate. I opened the closet, took out a small suitcase, and started packing. I didn't take much, just a few essential clothes and, most importantly, my documents. My ID, the deeds to the properties in my name, the company's incorporation papers, and, crucially, the large savings account my mother had gifted me for our wedding. These were the things that would secure my future. I couldn't let them fall into Daniel's hands. I did everything in absolute silence. The slightest noise, like the zip of the suitcase, made my heart leap into my throat. I was terrified that Daniel would wake up. It felt like an escape, fleeing from a sleeping monster. Once I finished packing, I quietly dragged the suitcase out of the room. I didn't have the courage to look back at Daniel's face. If I saw him then, I knew I wouldn't be able to stop myself from screaming. Downstairs, I left a short note on the table. "Gone to my parents. Take care of yourself while I'm away. Love you." The words, "love you," made me want to vomit, but I had to write them to ensure Daniel suspected nothing. I quietly opened the front door, pulled the suitcase out, and closed it behind me. The moment that door, the door to our shared home, clicked shut, I felt as if a massive weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I took a deep breath of the cool night air. I felt reborn. I walked out of the gated community under the cover of darkness. I didn't go to my parents' house. I didn't want to worry them. Instead, I checked into a luxury hotel in the city. For the next few days, this would be my secret base of operations. Sitting in the unfamiliar hotel room, looking out at the glittering city skyline, I knew my fight had entered a new, more intense, and dangerous phase. But I wasn't afraid. This midnight escape had given me freedom, and I would use that freedom to prepare for my final counterattack. For the few days after I left the house, I maintained the pretense that I was at my parents' place in the Hamptons. I texted and called Daniel daily, keeping up a concerned and caring attitude so he wouldn't suspect a thing. Daniel, for his part, seemed thrilled to have his freedom. He had no idea that his every move was under my surveillance. I knew I needed one final piece of evidence, something undeniable that would expose Daniel and Laura's entire conspiracy. The evidence of Pip's poisoning was horrifying, but in a court of law, he could still argue it was a coincidence. I needed something more direct, more concrete. And I suspected his phone held those secrets. The problem was getting access to it. He never let his phone out of his sight. I needed an opportunity, and that opportunity came one Friday afternoon. I called Daniel, my voice deliberately weak. "Honey, I'm not feeling very well. Could you come pick me up from my parents this afternoon? I miss you so much." Daniel agreed immediately. He probably thought I had rested enough and it was time to continue with his plan. That afternoon, instead of going to the Hamptons, I went straight to the office. I went to my private office and waited. Everything was already prepared. I had asked Miss Song, a manager I trusted, to prepare several copies of a financial report with serious errors, numbers that suggested a huge loss for the company. When Daniel arrived, I was already in the conference room with Miss Song and Mr. Park, a department head who was also loyal to me. I deliberately coughed a few times and put on a pale expression. "Sorry to make you come in so suddenly," I said, pointing to a stack of papers on the table. "There's a serious problem with this month's financial report. I thought you should see it yourself and resolve it immediately." Daniel's face changed as he looked at the numbers. He knew that if these erroneous figures got out, it would be a devastating blow to the company's credibility. He immediately immersed himself in the work, forgetting everything else around him. He quickly sat down, took off his jacket, and placed his phone and car keys on the table before starting to work with the two managers to find a solution. This was the moment I had been waiting for. While everyone was focused on the documents, I quietly picked up Daniel's phone. "I'm feeling a bit tired," I announced. "I'm going to rest in my office for a bit. Let me know when you're done." No one paid any attention to me. I quickly went to my office and locked the door. My heart was racing. I had about 15 to 20 minutes before Daniel solved the fake problem. I turned on Daniel's phone screen. A password. For a second, I froze. "What's the password?" I took a deep breath and racked my brain. Daniel wasn't a complex person. He usually used numbers that were meaningful to him. I tried his birthday. Incorrect. My birthday. Incorrect. Our wedding anniversary. Also incorrect. Time was ticking, and I was starting to break out in a cold sweat. My plan can't fail because of a simple password. I tried to calm myself and think, what other numbers were important to him? Suddenly, Leo's face flashed in my mind. With trembling hands, I entered the child's birthday, the date I had seen on the birth certificate Laura had proudly shown me. The phone unlocked. I felt my whole body go cold. In his mind, his illegitimate son's birthday was more important than our wedding anniversary. Pain and anger welled up inside me, but I quickly pushed them aside. There was no time to be sad. I quickly navigated to his messaging app, and what I found was more horrifying than I could have imagined. A chat with Laura was pinned to the top. I scrolled through their conversation. They weren't just talking about money or condos. They were discussing their plan to deal with me. Laura: "Babe, when are you going to deal with that bitch?" "I can't wait any longer." Daniel: "Honey, calm down. Everything is going according to plan. I think the stuff is working. She's been looking much weaker lately." Laura: "But what if it's not enough? Isn't there a faster, more certain way?" Daniel: "No, it has to look natural. Do you want us to get caught? Just be patient a little longer. All of her assets will be ours soon." My hands were shaking so badly I could barely read. Laura knew about the plan. In fact, she was pushing for it to happen faster. They weren't just trying to kill me. They were after my family's entire fortune. I couldn't hesitate any longer. I used my own phone to take pictures of their entire chat history. Every single message, every single word was evidence of their horrific crime. I sent all the pictures to my email and then deleted any trace of my activity from Daniel's phone. Just as I finished, there was a knock on the door. It was Daniel. I quickly locked his phone, took a deep breath to compose myself, and opened the door. "Is it done?" I asked, trying to smile. "Yeah, it's done. Just a minor miscalculation. Let's go home." I nodded. In the car on the way back, I sat next to the man who had tried to kill me, but there was no longer any fear in my heart. I had the final, decisive proof. It was time to bring the curtain down on this play. With the final piece of evidence in my hands, I knew it was time to end everything. I couldn't wait another moment. I had to act immediately before Daniel and Laura could commit another heinous act. The following Monday morning, I arrived at the office very early. I wore a black power suit, my makeup was darker than usual, and my hair was tied back in a neat bun. I wanted to look authoritative and decisive. I summoned my assistant and gave her an order. Announced to all departments. An emergency all-hands meeting for Vance Morgan Development is being convened today at 9 a.m. sharp in the main conference room. Attendance is mandatory for every single employee, with no exceptions. The agenda will be announced at the meeting. My assistant was a little surprised by my firm command and cold expression, but she quickly carried out my instructions. The news of the emergency meeting spread like wildfire throughout the company, sparking numerous speculations. No one knew what was about to happen. Just then, Daniel arrived. He came into my office, looking slightly annoyed. "What is this? Why did you call an all-hands meeting without consulting me? Is something important going on?" I looked up at him, my gaze empty of any emotion. "Yes, something very important. The very survival of this company is at stake. You'll find out at the meeting. Oh, and don't forget to sit in the front row. It's the seat for the CEO, after all." My unusual demeanor left Daniel slightly baffled, but he didn't press further. He probably thought I was just trying to embarrass him professionally again. He could not have imagined that what was about to unfold would be 1,000 times worse than he could ever conceive. At 9 a.m. sharp, every employee of Vance Morgan Development was gathered in the main conference room. The atmosphere was tense and quiet. Everyone sat in their seats, their eyes fixed on the podium where I stood. Daniel was in the front row center, a hint of arrogance still on his face, befitting his title of CEO. He didn't know it would be the last time he would sit in that seat. I scanned the room once before letting my gaze rest on Daniel. My voice, calm and clear, resonated through the conference room as I spoke into the microphone. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending on such short notice. I know you must all be wondering why I've called this sudden meeting. I won't waste your time. We are here today to uncover a truth, a disgusting truth that has been hidden within our company for far too long." A murmur went through the room. People looked at each other, confused. Daniel frowned. He was starting to sense that something was wrong. I signaled to the tech team, and the large screen behind me lit up. I took a deep breath. It was time for the finale. "The truth I am about to reveal," I continued, "concerns our CEO, Mr. Daniel Morgan." All eyes turned to Daniel. He was stunned, his face turning pale. He shot up from his seat, about to say something. "Mr. Morgan, please have a seat." My ice-cold voice cut him off. "The highlight of the show is just beginning. It would be in your best interest to sit down and watch until the end." Daniel froze for a moment, then slowly sank back into his chair. The air in the room was stretched taut, like a guitar string about to snap. The meeting that would seal Daniel's fate had officially begun. "As many of you know," I went on, my voice still even but now laced with power, "Vance Morgan Development was founded entirely with my family's capital. It was a wedding gift for me and Mr. Morgan. I entrusted him with full management of the company, hoping he would work with me to build it into something even greater. But I was wrong." I pressed a button on the remote in my hand. The first picture appeared on the large screen. It was the photo I had taken of Daniel outside the Miami condo, holding flowers and designer bags, his face beaming. "This is CEO Daniel Morgan during an urgent business trip to Miami." The room started to buzz. Daniel stared at the picture, the blood draining from his face. I didn't give him a chance to recover. I clicked the remote again. The screen switched to a video clip. It was the audio recording of my conversation with Laura, overlaid with photos of her and Leo from her social media. Laura's clear voice filled the room, boasting about her self-made man and admitting that Daniel was the child's father. Ladies and gentlemen, this woman and child were the true reason for our CEO's business trips. The child is over a year old, which means our CEO has been deceiving his wife since the very beginning of their marriage. The murmurs in the room grew louder. All eyes, a mixture of shock, contempt, and curiosity, were fixed on Daniel. He sat frozen in his chair, his hands clenched into fists, his body trembling. But the show wasn't over. I continued to present the evidence. This time, it was a stream of receipts and bank transfer records. A $15,000 handbag, a multi-million-dollar condo deposit, and numerous other luxury purchases for his mistress, all paid for with huge sums withdrawn from the company's account. And this is how CEO Daniel Morgan used company funds. He used the money earned from all of our blood, sweat, and tears to support the lavish lifestyle of his mistress and their child. The silence was broken. People started talking out loud. Some shook their heads in disgust, others muttered curses. The respectable, competent image Daniel had built for so long crumbled to dust. I looked Daniel straight in the eye, my gaze as sharp as a blade. You cheating on me and betraying me could be considered our private matter. But you embezzling company funds and betraying the trust of my father and every employee in this room is no longer a private matter. I paused, giving people a moment to digest the shocking information. And then, I delivered the final, most devastating blow. But all of this is nothing compared to the crime he was about to commit. The screen switched to the final images, the photo of the dead hamster, Pip, the picture of the supplement bottle, and most horrifyingly, the entire transcript of the text messages between Daniel and Laura, discussing their plan to poison me and seize my assets. Conspiracy to murder wife and steal inheritance. The words appeared in bold red letters in the center of the screen, like a formal indictment. In that instant, the room erupted. Everyone shot up from their seats. No one could believe their eyes. This was far beyond anything they could have imagined. The CEO they had respected was, in fact, a cold-blooded attempted murderer. Daniel looked like he had lost his mind. "No," he screamed. "She's framing me. It's all fabricated." He tried to rush the podium to stop me, but security guards immediately appeared and restrained him. I looked at Daniel, thrashing in desperation, with cold, emotionless eyes. I raised the microphone, and my voice, loud and firm, cut through the chaos. As the chairwoman of the board of Vance Morgan Development, I hereby declare the immediate termination of Mr. Daniel Morgan from all his positions. Security, please remove this man from the premises. The law will handle the rest. The drama was over. Daniel was dragged out in disgrace in front of the entire company. I stood at the podium, watching the back of the man who was once my husband. I felt no triumph, only a cold, hollow emptiness. It was truly over. After Daniel was humiliatingly ejected from the company, I immediately had the locks on the CEO's office changed and ordered his computer and all related documents to be sealed. I knew the fight wasn't over yet. There were still legal battles ahead with Laura. As I expected, about an hour after the meeting ended, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I had a good idea who it was. I calmly answered the call. A sharp, hate-filled voice immediately erupted from the other end. It was Laura. "You crazy bitch! What did you do to Daniel? You venomous snake! You framed him, didn't you?" I listened silently, letting her vent all her anger. I could only imagine how furious she must be. Daniel had surely called her and told her everything spun in a way that made him the victim and me the villain, of course. Only after Laura had been screaming for a while did I quietly speak. My voice was surprisingly calm. "Laura, it seems you know everything now. Instead of calling me and cursing, why don't you go ask your lover what he did? Don't give me that crap. Daniel loves me. He did everything for me. You're just some old hag who can't even have a baby. You couldn't keep your husband, so now you're playing these dirty tricks," Laura shrieked. The phrase "can't even have a baby" stung me again, but this time, it didn't hurt as much. I just felt pity for her ignorance. "Laura, did you know that Vance Morgan Development, the company your beloved self-made man supposedly built, was actually a wedding gift to me from my parents? Did you know that the condo you're living in, the car you drive, the designer things you own, all of it was bought with my money?" The other end of the line went silent. My words must have been a huge shock. I continued, my voice still calm, but every word was a dagger. Do you really think Daniel truly loves you? He only ever loved my money. And he used my money to buy your cheap affection. You and he were nothing more than a transaction. You sold your body and your naivety, and he used his wife's money to buy satisfaction and a son. Lies! Laura's voice trembled. Her initial bravado was gone. You think I'm lying? Then go ask him. Ask him if, without my money, he could have bought you a $15,000 handbag or put a deposit on a multi-million-dollar condo. Or would he just be some ordinary office worker making a meager salary? Did you love him, Laura? Or did you love the glamorous life he painted for you with someone else's money? I could hear sobbing on the other end of the line. She couldn't accept the cruel truth. And one more thing, Laura, I said, delivering the final blow. Did you know that I am Ellie, the dear older sister you confided all your secrets in? My last words were like a bomb. I heard a crash on the other end. Laura must have dropped her phone. A long silence followed. I knew she was in a state of profound shock. To find out that the person she trusted most, to whom she had revealed all her secrets, was her greatest enemy. After a long pause, Laura spoke into the phone, her voice trembling. How could you? That's the question I should be asking you and Daniel. Why did you two do this to me? I retorted coldly. I just took back what was mine. Goodbye. I hung up before Laura could say another word. The confrontation was over. I had laid all my cards on the table. I knew that after this call, the relationship between Daniel and Laura would surely crumble. A love built on lies and money could never withstand the onslaught of truth and poverty. Immediately after firing Daniel, I didn't waste a single minute. I contacted the best lawyer I knew, a close friend of my father's. I explained the entire situation and submitted all the evidence I had collected, the photos, the audio recording, the text messages, the bank records, and the results of the toxicology report on the food, which I had secretly commissioned after Pip's death. After reviewing all the evidence, my lawyer marveled that he had never seen a case with such clear, compelling, and perfectly prepared evidence. He was confident of a nearly 100% chance of winning. The divorce petition was quickly filed with the court. The grounds for divorce were listed as the husband's adultery and fathering of a child out of wedlock, embezzlement of company funds, and conspiracy to murder his wife. A thick file of evidence was attached to the petition. Daniel, having been kicked out of the company, still seemed to be in disbelief. He kept trying to contact me, sometimes begging for forgiveness, other times making threats. I didn't answer a single call or text. To me, that man was already dead. The trial proceeded quickly. Daniel hired a lawyer, but in the face of the irrefutable evidence I presented, his attorney could barely find a word to say in his defense. In court, Daniel denied everything to the end, claiming he had been framed and that I had fabricated the text messages. But when the audio recording of Laura's voice was played, and especially when the toxicology report was presented, he completely fell apart. The court delivered its verdict. Daniel and I were officially divorced. Because Daniel was found to be entirely at fault for the dissolution of the marriage, he was not entitled to any division of the assets I or my family owned prior to the marriage, which included Vance Morgan Development. Even the marital assets accumulated during the marriage were divided in a way that was extremely unfavorable to him. The Greenwich estate we lived in was owned by my parents, so he had to vacate it immediately. The car he drove was registered to the company. All shares of Vance Morgan Development, of course, remained mine. The only thing Daniel got out of the marriage was $50,000 in cash, his half of the joint savings we had accumulated over the year. Compared to everything he once had, this amount was a mockery. Daniel walked out of the courtroom with a haggard face. He looked as if he had aged 10 years in an instant. In a short period of time, he had lost everything: his job, his reputation, his money, and his family. That was the price he had to pay for his greed and betrayal. When I heard the verdict, I felt no joy or triumph, just a sense of relief. The nightmare was finally over. I was officially free from this toxic marriage. I had protected my family's assets and my own honor. Walking out of the courtroom, I looked up at the clear blue sky. A chapter of my life had closed. Ahead of me was a new chapter, a new path I would have to walk alone. But I wasn't afraid. I knew I was strong enough to start over. After the trial, Daniel was left with practically nothing. Kicked out of the estate and forced to return the company car, the $50,000 he had was only enough to rent a small studio apartment and start from scratch. To make matters worse, with the stigma of being an adulterer, a fraud, and an attempted murderer, no company would hire him. Once the money and status were gone, Daniel could no longer support Laura's extravagant lifestyle. The condo he had promised vanished like a mirage. There were no more designer bags or expensive gifts. The love Laura had praised so highly was now put to the harshest test of reality, and it failed. Laura, who had been devastated to learn the truth about me and Daniel, completely broke down, but her breakdown soon turned into resentment. She blamed Daniel for everything. It was because of his incompetence and lies, she thought, that she and her son were in this predicament. The apartment that was once their love nest became a battlefield. "You're a useless man," a neighbor later recounted, hearing her scream one day. "What did you promise me? Where's the condo? The car? My status? Now we have to live like this, hiding in this dump." Daniel, already mired in frustration and despair, had no patience left to placate her. "Shut up. If it wasn't for your endless greed, I wouldn't be in this mess. You're nothing but a gold digger." "Yeah, I'm a gold digger. But who was it that lured this gold digger in with material things in the first place? Now that you're broke, you're blaming me? You coward!" They tore into each other, hurling accusations. The sweet whispers of love were replaced with vicious, contemptuous words. The true love they had boasted of was more fragile than cheap porcelain. It shattered under the pressure of grim reality. Eventually, the inevitable happened. Laura took the child and left. She couldn't stand a life of poverty with a failed, incompetent man like Daniel. Before she left, she even took a portion of the little money Daniel had left. Daniel was completely broken. He had lost his wife, his job, and now, the woman for whom he had risked everything had abandoned him. He was left alone in the empty apartment, drowning himself in alcohol and belated regret. But it was too late. All that lay ahead of him was darkness. The love he had tried to buy by selling his honor and integrity had ended in the most miserable way possible. After breaking up with Daniel, Laura's life was far from easy. With her source of income cut off, she had to struggle to raise her child alone. Her hatred for Daniel gradually shifted towards me. In Laura's shallow mind, I was the root of all her suffering. If it weren't for me, she would still be a pampered woman living in luxury. That hatred grew day by day, paralyzing her reason and eventually turning into a mad obsession. I suspected Laura wouldn't leave me alone. After the divorce, I hired personal security and was cautious in everything I did. I had a gut feeling that the danger was not over yet, and I was right. One evening, I was returning home from the office after a long day. My car was driving on a quiet road on the outskirts of the city. Suddenly, a taxi came speeding up from behind, honking its horn and driving erratically, as if trying to force my car to the side of the road. My driver, Mr. Choi, an experienced professional, sensed something was wrong and held the wheels steady, trying to maintain a safe distance. But the taxi became more and more aggressive. It suddenly accelerated, overtook my car, and then swerved in front of us, forcing us to a stop. The back door of the taxi opened, and Laura got out. Her face was gaunt, and her eyes were bloodshot and filled with hatred. She looked like a woman who had lost her mind. "Eleanor Vance," she screamed, "get out of the car. This is all your fault. I'm going to kill you today." I sat in the car, my heart pounding, but I tried to remain calm. I signaled to Mr. Choi and my security guard not to act rashly. Laura didn't say anything more. She suddenly ran to the driver's side of the taxi and started fighting with the driver. The young taxi driver, confused by the situation, was caught off guard as Laura managed to shove him aside and grab the steering wheel. She slammed her foot on the accelerator, and the car roared to life, heading straight for my car. It all happened in an instant. But fortunately, I was prepared. Mr. Choi, with his trained reflexes, immediately turned the wheel and threw the car into reverse, avoiding a head-on collision. The taxi Laura was driving lost control and crashed head-on into a large tree on the side of the road. A horrific sound of impact echoed, the front of the taxi crumpled like paper, and smoke began to rise. My security guard immediately called the police and an ambulance. I sat in the car, trembling, as I watched the chaotic scene unfold before me. If I hadn't been prepared today, if Mr. Choi hadn't reacted in time, I would probably not be alive. Hatred had turned Laura into a monster. The police and ambulance arrived quickly. Laura was trapped in the car and quite seriously injured, but her life was not in danger. Even after being rescued, she kept screaming my name and spewing curses. This failed murder attempt put an end to Laura's freedom. Her crazed and foolish actions led her straight to prison. Hatred didn't bring back what she had lost. Instead, it took away everything she had left, including her future. The incident of Laura trying to run me over sent shockwaves through the community. With the clear evidence at the scene and the testimony of the taxi driver and myself, Laura could not deny her crime. I decided to use this opportunity to bring everything to light. I submitted to the police all the evidence related to Daniel and Laura's crimes, from the affair, fraud, and embezzlement to the plot to poison me. My divorce case was now transformed into a major criminal investigation. The police acted swiftly. Daniel was immediately summoned for questioning. Faced with the irrefutable evidence, especially the text messages and the toxicology report, he finally had to admit his guilt. He confessed that he had conspired with Laura to slowly poison me and take over my assets. The trial of Daniel and Laura was held publicly. I attended the court as the victim. Seeing the two people, one who was once my husband, the other I had treated like a sister, sitting in the defendant's box, I no longer felt hatred. I only felt a sense of pity. Their greed and malice had destroyed their own lives. Laura received the harshest sentence for attempted murder. Her crime was considered an extremely dangerous act that posed a great threat to society. The court sentenced her to 20 years in prison. Upon hearing the verdict, Laura collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Perhaps only then did she realize the extent of her foolishness, but it was too late. Her future would be spent within the cold walls of a prison. Daniel was charged with conspiracy to commit murder. Although his actions did not directly result in death, his plot and methods were deemed extremely cruel and malicious. The court sentenced Daniel to 7 years in prison. They had received their just punishment for the crimes they committed. Justice was served, and all the resentment and hatred could now be put to rest. I watched as Daniel and Laura were led away by the bailiffs. The two people who had once thrown everything away for money and desire would now spend their youth paying the price in prison. I walked out of the courtroom, a sense of peace settling over me. My fight was truly over. I had won, not with the satisfaction of a vengeful person, but with resilience and a belief in justice. I had protected myself and my family, and I had reclaimed my dignity. A year after the trial, I received news that Daniel wanted to see me. It was a request to see me one last time before he was transferred to another prison. After a moment of hesitation, I agreed. I felt I needed a complete break from the past, a final closure. I visited Daniel at the prison. The man sitting behind the glass partition was no longer the dapper, sophisticated CEO I once knew. He was gaunt, his hair was streaked with gray, and his face was etched with deep lines of fatigue and regret. When he saw me, Daniel hung his head low, unable to meet my eyes. After a long silence, he spoke through the receiver, his voice trembling. "I'm sorry, Eleanor. I know it's too late for anything I say to matter, but I am truly sorry. I was wrong. I was blinded by money and greed. I apologize for everything I did to you and your family." I listened in silence. This apology, a year ago, might have caused me pain, but now it stirred no emotion in me. "You don't need to apologize to me," I said, my voice steady. "The person you need to apologize to is yourself. I hope you reflect on your actions in prison, and, when you get out, you can live an honest life." We sat in silence for a moment. There was nothing more to say. The past had become an indelible scar. I stood up and put down the receiver. "Well, I'm leaving. Take care of yourself." I walked away without looking back. That brief meeting officially ended all ties between us. From that moment on, Daniel Morgan was just a name from the past, an expensive lesson life had taught me. After settling all the old scores, I poured all my energy and focus into my work. I took full control of Vance Morgan Development, managing everything myself. The business knowledge I had learned from my father and my hands-on experience helped me get up to speed quickly. I was strong, decisive, and had a clear vision. Under my leadership, not only did the company recover from the recent scandal, but it grew stronger every day. I was no longer the sheltered young lady living in silk, nor the wife confined to her home. I had become a truly independent and empowered businesswoman. A few years later, I stood firmly on my own 2 feet. Vance Morgan Development had become one of the top firms in the industry. I even bought a significant stake in my father's Vance Consolidated, becoming one of its largest shareholders. I had proven to everyone, and most importantly to myself, that I could succeed on my own merits. Sometimes, I hear news of the people from my past. Daniel was released early for good behavior and is now living a quiet life as an ordinary office worker in a distant city. Laura is still in prison, with no one knowing when she might be released. I have forgiven them, not because they deserved forgiveness, but for my own peace of mind. Holding on to hatred would only weigh me down. One weekend afternoon, I stood on the balcony of my new penthouse, looking down at the city glittering with lights. I was alone, but never lonely. I had a successful career, good friends, and a free and happy life. The painful scars of the past had made me who I am today. A stronger, more resilient version of myself who knows how to love herself more. From the ashes of betrayal, I had been reborn, like a phoenix, more vibrant and beautiful than ever. My life was only just beginning.